Welcome to the most important week of the year for the podcast industry. Welcome to Podcast Movement 2025.
Hi. Howdy, everyone. Thank you all for being here. At Edison Research, we're known for measuring media consumption, and we often get asked to forecast our numbers. I mean, that's like asking us to predict the future. So we always decline. It's like, sorry here. Took a little while for the PowerPoint to come up. So it's like asking us to predict the future, so we always decline. I mean, just ask the toilet paper companies in 2019 how much product they needed to stock shelves the following year. It's impossible to predict the future, but let's be honest, we're all going to try to do it anyway. So why not go into it well-equipped with a few indicators that can help us anticipate? Today we're going to focus on three. The first, trends. Like when your Apple Watch at the end of the week adds up all your steps at Podcast Movement, it's going to tell you a lot about the direction of your health. And this one says a lot about the health of the podcast industry. According to our National Share of Ear quarterly study, Americans combined for 170 million weekly podcast listening hours 10 years ago. Today, with more people listening, Americans combine for 773 hours per week. That's an increase of 355%. Shout out to James Cridlin of Pod News, who inspired the statistic that showcases that, yes, more people are adopting podcasts, but it also means that consumption in our weekly routines is also on the rise. Now, the second type of indicator is like a high school. This is the year Gen Alpha are entering their first year of high school, and there's no better way to understand what types of sneakers the school might rock or the slang they'll use to talk in the next 4 years than by looking at its first year students. Here's an example. My nephew has a habit of calling me Unc. I say, that's pretty cool, short for uncle. When the kids use slang with me, it makes me feel that I'm also very young, Not until my girlfriend fell asleep listening to Kylie Kelsey's podcast episode about Gen Alpha terms the other night did I realize Unc has a different meaning. It wasn't enough to start off my midlife crisis, but I did not sleep well that night. Now, by understanding first years in high school, we can understand the slang terms of the future, and we can do the same thing for podcasting. By looking at consumers who started within the last year, we can get a sense of how this class might impact the medium's future. We'll also see how they differ from long-timers or those who have been listening to podcasts for 5 years or more. For example, there's an 8-year age difference in terms of median age between first years and long-timers. Incoming listeners are younger, but despite my emphasis on Gen Alpha, Gen Z, don't rule out Gen X or Boomers. Half of first years may be under the age of 35, but that also means that half of first years are also over the age of 35. That's a healthy sign that the medium appeals to everyone. Again, we'll look at trends, we'll look at first years, we'll come back to our third indicator later on. Much of this data is going to stem from our quarterly research study called Edison Podcast Metrics, used by both publishers and ad agencies to understand the podcast consumer. It's of weekly podcast consumers, which represent 40% of the American population. And we broke this down into three digestible topics and three stories you all have to hear. The first involves changing behaviors, discovery device. A lot of it because of the increase in video podcasts. The second deals with evolving demographics. And the last is about information on consumers and what they think about AI and podcasting. Yes, we're calling it the evolving ear, And if you want access to this report and other insights for free, just come up to me with this secret signal. You don't even have to say anything. So it feels like yesterday when I got my first iPod. But seeing that there's, it's easier to find in museums nowadays, it's a reminder that we live in this age of constant disruption. New companies, new tech. When Edison Research started measuring podcasts in 2006, around this time when I got my first iPod, my colleagues then never would have guessed its future would involve smartphones. Those didn't exist back then. They sure as hell wouldn't have said smart TVs. Since 2021, we've seen the percentage of US consumers who say they use the smart TV most often for podcasts go from 1% to 9%, surpassing even the smart speaker. As podcasters, many of you are disrupting what is on TV in American households throughout the day, partly because we've seen disruption in our own industry. Video has transformed the definition of the word podcast. Matt just said it himself. You'll likely continue to hear this advice, and this is one of the reasons why. Take a look at this blue bar on the right here. 77% of first years who actively watch podcasts has surpassed that 75% of first years who ever listen to audio-only podcast. If you're not on video yet, Matt, might be time to start experimenting, at least start experimenting. One of the benefits is discovery. The majority of both groups who listen and watch podcasts say they started listening to the audio-only version of a podcast after discovering its video version. Video doesn't necessarily eat up audio. It can help it get discovered. Now, this is largely because of one of the biggest disruptors of our generation, YouTube. YouTube grew into the #1 service that Americans use most often for podcasts. It surpassed Spotify a year ago, which might lead you to think that YouTube is more popular among first years. Interestingly, though, YouTube's share is the same for both groups. The real difference is the lack of first years flocking to Apple Podcasts. When we look a little closer, first years are 9 times more likely than long-timers to say they use social media platforms most often for podcasts. That's Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Among first years, they're just as big as Apple Podcasts, the company that started it all. You need to be prepared for constant disruption. How can we experiment with video? How can we optimize long-form and short-form video content on social media? And what monetization opportunities lie ahead now that we have a presence on TV? Now, another story that I want you guys to take away is the story of evolving demographics. Now, some of these things might surprise you, some of them may not. For example, relative to long-timers, first years are far more likely to be women. They're more likely to be women. Now, we're not surprised by this, and that's because many of this year's breakthrough shows are female-led. We've seen Kylie Kelsey debut in our rankers in terms of weekly audience size at a high ranking. Mel Robbins, Stephanie Sue of Rotten Mango has climbed the charts. And others, like the New Heights podcast, have a strong connection to one of the most popular women in the world. Whether the shows brought in more women to podcasts or the female audience helped popularize these shows, probably a combination of both. One thing is for sure, we can anticipate a more balanced gender split for podcast consumers in the future, and perhaps one day, podcast consumers may skew female, just like this year's incoming class. Now, despite being younger, first years are more likely to be Republican than Democrat. The opposite is true for long-timers. Now, this tracks with the number of shows with conservative viewpoints that have climbed the charts in the past year. Think Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, Candace, Charlie Kirk. And another part of this evolving demographic story is ethnic diversity. 39% of first years identify as Hispanic, Black, Asian, or with some other ethnic group. compared with 25% among long-timers. The data suggests here that consumers will look more like the face of the country. And I know there is this war on inclusivity all of a sudden. But when it comes to business making decisions, people are going to include themselves anyway. As an industry, we need to be prepared for both the incoming diversity of people and thought. At the end of the day, podcasting comes down to you. Allow me to explain. AI has made its way into podcasting. About a fourth of first years and 1 in 5 long-timers say they've listened to a podcast that was narrated by an AI voice. Again, this is ever tried the show. It doesn't necessarily mean continuous listening. Think about the things you've tried and haven't gone back to. But I want you to see a sample of what first years and long-timers currently think about AI. Take a look at this video.
I've heard of those. I sometimes listen to audiobooks that are read by AI, but again, it takes something away from it for me because I'm in it for the people that are doing it, and when it's not a real person and I can tell by the inflection of the voice and the lack of emotion in it, I'm like, this is not quite my speed.
I've never heard of that, but if there were any AI podcasts, I won't listen to that because I like bantering. I like witty speakers. I like good conversationalists, and I can't imagine AI being able to do that ever.
Like, I'll be honest, when I type emails for my job and Google will complete a sentence for me, because I do a lot of boilerplate stuff, I don't hate that. That part makes my job easier. But I don't want it to be doing the creative stuff. I don't want it to be doing the stuff that when I don't work, it does that for me. I want to do the stuff that makes the certain day-to-day stuff easier. Like there's a meme on a thing like I want AI to do like the dishes and take out the trash, not my job. I mean that's oversimplification of the idea, but that's kind of where it's going.
You take the humanity out of that particular podcast, and that's where I think it gets dangerous, is that not being able to tell anymore, like what's real and what's AI. And I think that's almost taking it a step too far, is to try to turn it into something that's human and confusing people. I feel like, again, it goes back to who's executing it, right? So if it's the AI, even if it's the person's voice, if it's a robot projecting someone else's voice and the robot's doing the work, it's taking away the nuance and the creativity and the in-the-momentness, if that makes sense, that only human beings can sort of provide. Because the awareness that we have versus the AI being like non-aware, and it's scary that the AI is becoming closer to being sentient and aware, and then that line is becoming a lot thinner. So the more we can get away from that happening, I think the better.
So Rich Eisen is one of your favorite podcasts. Let's say you listen to an episode and you really liked it, and later on you came to find out that it was actually an AI version.
He's a
of
robot.
Rich Eisen.
That's it. He rips off the mask one day, and it's nothing but T2 or T3.
Right.
That's it. You're done.
I would be impressed at the level of the technology, but I would also not like it. I would feel like I was robbed of getting to listen to a person, rather than, even though I was convinced it was a person, it still wasn't a person at the end of the day. And even if, there's the thing, like if I never found out, I would have gone on believing that it was a real person, but I would have felt cheated because, I wasn't listening to a human being.
Now, there is a lot of room for AI to grow. About a quarter of both long-timers and first years have tried one that was narrated by AI. But this is, when we spoke to a lot of podcast consumers and brought them in and interviewed them over video, many of them had this sentiment. They seemed to put they drew a line in the sand and said, yes, tools, to inspire you, use AI. But when it comes to the execution of the podcast itself, I'd like to have a human being. And, I always thought it was going to be Neo that was going to help us win the war against the machines. But it turns out it is you, the podcaster. People want to see you and hear you. You are the one. You guys are the star. Seems that every company is in a race for who can spend the most money on AI initiatives. But despite of recent cuts and layoffs of podcast divisions, it's going to be very, very hard to get rid of you guys. And that's because we live in a creator-led economy today. Podcasting today is creator-led. Take a look at some of the shows with the large concentration of first years in their audience, as well as some of the shows with a large concentration of long-timers in their audience in the bottom row. You can see that shows with the strong presence of first years, like the Dumb Blonde podcast with Bunny XO. You also have Kale Lowry with Karma and Chaos, and you have a couple other shows, Nikki and Bree, the Bella Twins, right? A lot of these have originated from an influencer brand, from a creator space. Now, there are many cases among shows with a large concentration of long-timers, but notice how it's more represented by networks and brands. There's shows from Slate, from NPR, from iHeartRadio. Today, podcasting is creator-led. People love brands, but people love people more. You guys are the final indicator. Your actions from here on out will determine podcasting's future. What happens with TV, what happens with AI is up to you. And we asked respondents that we interviewed if they had one final message after we revealed to them that they were going to be present at this conference. And here's what they said. Take a look at this video.
Keep tackling hard subjects, and especially just to use your voice without the fear of cancellation or any or to speak and not feel stifled.
Just to be genuine. I think being just, yourself relates more to your audience. I think if you're filtering yourself, that's not helpful. And yeah, I don't know. I think that speaks volumes when an audience can connect with the host and with the people they're bringing on their podcast. I really respect that.
Just to be honest about everything, and try to ask the right questions, like you are, like that.
To be real, not use artificial AI. I think people look for real. At least I do. In my generation, we look for real, not artificial. And I know sometimes you can't even really tell the difference, but to me, it's probably more mental. I want it real.
There's nothing I would like to share, but just keep being real. And I love the real information, and it makes me feel like there are human to human interactions, even with the higher ups, when it sometimes feels like there's no interaction with them.
I would say for anyone who's just starting a podcast, please keep going. Don't stop, because you never know who's listening. You might have someone who really, really likes it, even though you're maybe have a struggle building a following. For those few people that you're reaching right now, it's really important to them. And who knows, right? They might be telling people, and it might take them a little while to get other people to listen, but just keep at it, especially if you love it. You're doing something good and you're providing something, making a difference in the world. It's an art form. So as a fellow artist who's experienced that in a different format, just keep going, keep doing your thing, man.
All right, so I thought a lot about the responses, to keep it real, to be human, to keep going. This summer I committed to doing a triathlon by the time I'm 35. I'm 32 right now. 32, yes, I'm 32. Maybe I am going through a midlife crisis. I don't know. One day I'd like to do an Ironman, like you see in this picture here, over 100 miles. Hey, shout out to you. Over 100 miles of cycling, then you finish with a marathon. Then you started off with a 2-mile plus swim. Problem is, I don't know how to swim. I mean, I won't drown, but my technique is so bad that I'm gassed by 1 or 2 laps. Now, I am taking lessons, I'm going to practice, and there's nothing more humbling than when a 7-year-old in the lane next to you smokes you in practice. But there's nothing more human than being imperfect, than making mistakes. Podcasting is very, very hard. It's a hard thing to do. You will have your good days. You will have your bad days. People will try to tell you, go in this direction, hold the mic this way, talk about this topic. Why do you talk about yourself so much? But at the end of the day, it's not so much how you do something that is going to determine the success in your future. The ultimate factor is if you decide to do something, whether you decide to show up. So my friends, keep going, don't stop, and may podcasting live long and prosper. Thank you, everyone.